Kia ora and welcome to CIO Leadership Live. I'm your host, Kathy O'Sullivan, the editor for CIO New Zealand. And it's my great pleasure today to introduce our guest, Brian Ferris, Chief Data Analytics and Technology Officer at Loyalty New Zealand. Hello, Brian. How are you? How are things in Wellington today?
Fantastic. Great to be here. Thanks for the invite. Awesome to be here in sunny Wellington.
Nice. Always a good time in the capital. So to kick things off, can you tell us a little bit more about your role as Chief Data Analytics and Technology Officer and what you and your team at Loyalty NZ do?
Absolutely. So Loyalty New Zealand, we're normally better known for the Flybuys program that we run. It's typically what people know us for, given that it's one of the best known brands in New Zealand. So that's been running 26 years, and my team across tech and data is looking after all of those assets that go into running it, using the data, protecting the data, and all of those sorts of things. So we have a pretty strong team in there, a team of just under 70, and particularly in our data and analytics. We've got 4 PhDs, 8 masters. We do some pretty serious data science in there. Interesting, when I took over, the term data science isn't used at Loyalty much because they've been doing it so long that predates the invention of that idea. And so we have a pretty full and complete suite there. We have everything from the software engineers. We've built our own loyalty engine because it's quite specialized what we do. And our testers, our DevOps people, through to our data engineers that have built and look after our data platform, and our insights analysts that sit over the top of that and get all the insights out and do all the personalization to get the really cool offers through to all our members.
Excellent. And I know, transformation has been a huge part of what you've been doing there at Loyalty NZ since you took up the role. And of course, you've worked in a lot of overseas organizations as well. So you'll have a different view on transformation, I'm sure, than, people who've just worked in New Zealand. But the word transformation, it is thrown around quite a bit as if, it's just a given, it's just something you do, but it is hard yakka. So can you talk us through how that approach has taken shape in your own career?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've been very lucky. I got some pretty cool gigs when I was over in Europe. So I was doing enterprise architecture for Heineken and then running enterprise data and analytics for Nike and EMEA, and got to learn a lot there. So Heineken was in the middle of a very large transformation. That was part of what I was brought in for, to be a part of it. Learned a lot there in terms of things maybe I wouldn't repeat again. And certainly the part that I was in was a very siloed organization at the time, and that was really challenging, and that the wheels came off later. I got to see a totally different approach at Nike, which is a very chaotic and anarchic kind of, feels like a startup, but is also really, really collaborative. And regardless of the problems that came up, people were always working together. And that worked a lot better. There was a lot of problems, but they all seemed to be overcome. So I took the learnings from those 2 big transformations that I've been involved in and some others before, and had the opportunity to apply them at Loyalty, which is really cool. Because it's small enough that you can actually get things done. I've got a C in front of my name, so that's quite a bit more influence than I had at, say, Nike or Heineken. But it's big enough that we've got budgets and teams that we're actually able to get things. And luckily, I guess, we were starting from a fairly low base. We had data centers. We still had a lot on-prem. We're running 2003 Windows servers if we go back 4 years. So there was really a lot of opportunity to change things up. There was an old Oracle data warehouse, an old SaaS stack. So it was a great opportunity to apply those lessons and see what worked, and then get us through to where we are now, which, as of March, we have nothing left on-prem, which is great. We're all fully in the cloud data platform, and a cloud API-driven loyalty engine, and has really transformed. I know it's a word that gets thrown around a lot, but the business has changed a lot as a result with what we're capable of doing, which is the whole point of, bringing in the new technologies.
I can just imagine the look of horror on your face when you saw that you had 2003 Windows in the organization. It must have been something that you needed a stiff drink after.
It was my first intro with my new IT manager, who we went to have a coffee to just, very, very, very first meeting. He's in Auckland, sat me down. Brian, I need to tell you something. Oh, okay. And was basically trying to sell me on, this is a priority, we need to do something. I was preaching to the choir on this one. We're going to be all over that really quickly.
Yeah, so, absolutely. And just talking of priorities, I mean, obviously, going through the transformation, you always have in mind, where you'd like to end up, ideally. But are there any kind of key steps you think CIOs must take along the way? Is there ever something to kick it off? Maybe it is finding that 2003 Windows and deciding that's it. But is there anything that you think is, from your experience, that's the kickoff point?
Yeah, I do. And I'm fairly passionate about this, that it shouldn't be about technology, which might seem a bit counterintuitive in a technology transformation. But it's where I've seen a lot of them come off the rails, and a lot do. They get stalled partway through. I think the critical steps any CIO can do is focus on really getting to understand the rest of the organization, understand their colleagues, particularly at the exec level. Who are they? What are the different things they're doing? And how does the organization work? How does it make money, or its equivalent in the public sector, or a not-for-profit? What actually matters? And then figure out where technology and the digital stuff can help that. So you work backwards from what the enterprise is trying to achieve, and you're bringing your colleagues solutions to make their lives easier, rather than trying to sell people, we need a new mobile, we need cloud, we need a new app. Why do we need them? And that's typically where I've seen it come off the rails. Partway down the track, budgets get squeezed. We're looking to cut things because, times are tight. If people don't understand what the end result is of what you're doing, they're really easy targets, because you're defending a new app that no one really understands why you're getting, or this cloud thing that no one's clear. We like blue skies. We don't really like clouds. Why would we want to buy a cloud? Where if what you're been talking about is your, for instance, CMO is saying, I need to be able to do up-to-date personalization. For that, I need good quality data. For that, it's got to be in something scalable. This is not negotiable. We have to keep funding it. That's not a business. That's not a digital transformation. That's a business transformation that just happens to use technology. And then it will keep going. Then you're defendable. So, and what I've seen is a number of organizations start at the other end of, right, we need app, cloud, a digital strategy, and it's totally independent from actually how the enterprise makes money. And I don't think I've seen any of those really succeed to date.
Yeah. And, you mentioned that you've learned a lot, from things that have gone wrong. So are there any other kind of challenges or, common roadblocks to be really mindful of when you're setting out on that, digital transformation plan that you can avoid or at least be mindful of along the way?
Yeah, and another one that's a little bit counterintuitive, the biggest problems and roadblocks I've seen have never been in the technology. Technical problems in general, my experience, you can typically overcome them. You can figure out the answer with enough smart people. The most challenging ones for me tend to come from people and culture. So if you haven't lined that stuff up in advance, and you haven't got your colleagues on board, and you haven't got the right culture in your team and the right team structure, then you're not going to succeed. If you've walked into an organization that may be a big SAP on-prem type place, and that's where all your people are, and there's a lot of very, very experienced, very clever SAP people, and you want to sell them on a complete cloud journey that's no longer going to use an ERP, you've got a massive change management exercise to go through. If you think you're just going to put in a bunch of tech and they're going to get right behind it and go for it, probably got another thing coming. So if you've got your people on board at all levels of the organization, they understand it, they're getting it, the outcomes are clear, the reasons, I think then it will work. So all the other roadblocks I've seen and problems have come because that hasn't been addressed up front. because people will then invent the problems or not mitigate the problems if they're not fully bought into it and they're not really convinced it was the right thing to do in the first place.
Absolutely. It's crucial, isn't it? Getting people on board and understanding that why you're doing it in the first place. So I'm curious then, Brian, where you stand, and, there's a few different schools of thought on this, but, transformation, is it a project with milestones and, a deadline, or is it just, something that's ongoing within any organization? And if it is an ongoing development, is there that risk of change fatigue, or the organization just going through, oh, here's another new system we have to learn, or your team themselves burnt out by just this constant cadence of work that never seems to end? Where do you stand on that? Is there an end date to transformation?
So I'm standing right in the middle of the road on this one. It's a definitive yes and no, but let me unwrap that a little bit more. So no, I think in the sense that because if you've tied your digital transformation to the overall enterprise strategy, as long as the enterprise strategy keeps evolving and changing and technology keeps evolving and changing to support it, you can't stop transforming. So in that sense, it's a no, because there's no end date on that. You need to keep bringing in the new tech. That said, I think it's a very hard yes in terms of you've got to break it up into chunks. There's got to be clear milestones, clear deliverables with clear value delivery and clear celebrations. So we're not just going forever on this. We're going to do a thing which has a purpose. It could be a new marketing communications. It could be a new recommendation engine, could be whatever it is. We understand why we're doing it. We do it. We get the value out of it. We get it into business as usual, and we celebrate. Job done. Then we start the next chunk. So yes is a big overall, but I don't think humans can cope with that very well. As you said, you get the burnout, you get the fatigue, you'll get a board that just feels like you're constantly coming and asking for money. And if you haven't really got those celebration points and the milestones, they're not going to be feeling they're getting the value back. So it's really important to chunk it up, and also allows you to stop and pivot along the way, because there may be times you got to pause. Money's tight. We're going to slow down. We're going to speed up. We're going to change direction. We're going to do a merger or an acquisition. And so if you've done it in chunks, then it's easy to move around and change your priorities within that as you go.
So you are one of our CIO top 50 this year, and congratulations on that. And I noticed in your, when you were talking about, all the work that you've done at Loyalty NZ, you spoke quite highly of how important it was. And when you were doing that transformation, that you had the backing, especially of your senior leadership team and of the exec. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you are collaborating and influencing the organization and its leadership team, and especially during your transformation?
Absolutely. Now, just in case any of them watch this as well, I have to acknowledge it's a work in progress. I'm still working on it, team. I'm getting there. But yeah, that's probably, well, not probably, that has been absolutely the number one focus, is building that connection through the organization. And our organization, we're a marketing organization. So what was the CMO, she's our CCO, is my key partner in crime. And it was really important for me that everything we were doing, not only did she understand it, but she wanted it, that it was something that built towards our strategy. And that took a lot of time up front, listening rather than telling. And this is where I'm still a work in progress. I'm better than I used to be. Listening to understand what those business challenges are and what the opportunities are, rather than selling all the cool things that tech could do. So by getting it round the other way, it was, hey, I'm hearing you've got this problem. Actually, we've got this technology that, you can just ramp up the capacity of a website 5 or 6 times pretty much instantly. You can do that. That's possible. That's, oh yeah, we'd like a piece of that. Cool, here's a plan to get there. So there was a lot of that building understanding and building trust that goes with it. That was the purpose, was to meet the enterprise strategy. And the result of that is tech debt was a really important work stream within our transformation, and our CCO was the co-sponsor of that. So we had a bit where we needed to pause and we needed to save some money as the economy started shrinking. So we were battening down the hatches a little bit. And we had an interesting conversation where she was fighting to try and drive more budget into the tech debt. And I was the one saying, look, I think we need to slow down there a bit. So that's a great situation to be in, which is obviously the reverse of normal, but it's built off a foundation that started, years before that, of building the trust and doing the listening. So, and that's been a key thing for me through the whole exec, and also our board is transparency, which means sharing. Some of the things that shows up for me is I'll share my ideas when they're very rough, very early. I've seen that people, when you ask someone for their input on an idea, but you're giving them a completely polished deck that's obviously totally thought through and basically set in concrete, it's not a very genuine ask. When you've got some scribble notes that are rough as guts and clearly you've got contradictions and all sorts in there and ask for their input, then it's obvious you really want the input. They can genuinely still change what you're thinking in the direction we're planning to go. And that builds the trust. But that transparency in return, you need an exec that you can trust and be very vulnerable with and kind of show your half-assed workings. So I've been lucky that we've got that. But the flip side, the advantage is that they get exposure to everything that I'm thinking of or we're thinking very early. So by the time we finish product, we're all on the same page.
And I guess it really helps then, that change isn't something that's being done to them, or as you say, it's a polished deck of, this is happening. And it's, it's more that you're doing the change with them, and which is what you've exactly done at Loyalty NZ. So, you, as Chief Data Analytics and Technology Officer, and that's quite a mouthful, the role of CIO, it's changing within organizations, and there are, Chief Technology Officers, Chief Digital Officers, there's the stock standard CIO. But, through all of that, the role is becoming increasingly important in organizations. So what do you think are some of the key attributes of a successful modern day CIO when it comes to leadership?
I borrow a bit from some of the thinking around CDOs, the Chief Data Officers, which is the background I've come from, which early on in the evolution of what was then a new role, there was talking about the offensive or the defensive CDO. And I think the same applies to a CIO. And historically, CIOs were typically defensive. They were mitigating risk. They were reducing cost. They were just making the whatever it was work. We don't care what it is. It should just be like water coming out of the tap when I want to use my email. I think a modern CIO needs to be more offensive. How does the business make money? How can I support that? How can I enable new products? Can technology be a product in its own right? They need to understand the customer, be at the forefront of the strategic discussions. As a result, I think there's much less requirement for deep technical knowledge. I think you've got to have some, but you can hire smart people to do the deep technical work, whether they're employees or vendors. With your basic knowledge, you need to build a deep knowledge of your organization, what makes it successful, how it makes money, or even just its cost model if it's a not-for-profit. And then you need to be able to bring your technical skills to bear. So that's all about influencing skills, understanding the language of your colleagues, knowing how to build trust, and it's going to be delivered. These are really, really complex, difficult transformations over long periods. So you're going to need to build the culture of a team that lets them really flourish and do the work and bring all their smarts out, because you won't have the smarts to do it. You can no longer go in and be the cleverest one in a meeting to solve it. So I think that's quite different to maybe 10 years ago when you had that defensive mindset, and quite often a CEO would know as much or more about all the systems as anyone else in the organization.
Now, you mentioned team culture there, and that's obviously a key thing for any leader, but particularly when, it is an employee's market right now and they can choose, which organizations they want to work for. How are you creating, that culture that helps people thrive and flourish?
So what the core underpinning of that for us is the DEIB, so diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. It started as something that we were building as an important focus, but what we realized is that pretty much everything within our people and culture space actually ties back to there. If you've got a diverse group of people, you treat them well, they feel like they're included and they have a deep sense of belonging, pretty much they'll steamroller over the top of everything else. They'll solve whatever problem's thrown at them. So that's the core for us, is understanding what that means for us as an organisation and how we make that real. We're finding it quite challenging. It seems pretty easy to do tick boxes and that stuff. There's various token gestures you can make, but we want to really deeply understand what that means so that we do really unleash the potential in our people. A lot about it for me, a lot of the stuff isn't new. It's been around a long time, particularly coming from a software development, software side. The whole agile culture, not methodologies, that's gone a bit horribly wrong, I think, but the agile culture around a growth mindset, servant leadership, being accessible, shifting authority and power down to where the knowledge is rather than moving it up, so move away from command and control. Those are all the things that sort of we're working on. I find they're very easy to say and put into a PowerPoint or a strategy. Trying to make them real takes a lot more effort. Like, I don't think any organization would say they're not a learning organization, or that, they encourage failures and fail fast and all that. I think the reality, if you can take a video or be a fly on the wall of when something goes horribly wrong, how the reaction is and how quickly blame comes into a conversation, I think that's where you get a real gauge of what the culture's like. So we're really focused on those areas to try and make it real and bring those things through. And so far, I think we're doing reasonably well, but we recognise there's still a long way to go. We've just done a lot of learning in that space at the moment. There's some areas we feel like we're doing quite well because they're the ones we know. We're worried about the bits we don't know, so we don't even know we're doing badly. And we want to make sure we're covering off those areas as well.
Great that you're looking at it in terms of across the whole organization, looking at your diversity and having more inclusive teams. And look, IT has an issue. We don't really have enough diversity in IT roles. We've got, especially with Maori and Pacifica, we are definitely getting more women into IT roles. And I noticed your t-shirt there, neurodiversity, minds of all kinds. So how can we encourage more people from diverse backgrounds or diverse ways of thinking to consider IT as a career? Are there any practical things that, you are looking at to get people, particularly when you look at your own IT team, get people into roles there?
Yep. I mean, there's some fairly straightforward things we're doing, which we'll go back a step. I think in IT itself, we've got a real problem that the available pool is not nearly diverse enough. So what we're hiring from isn't diverse enough. But within that pool, there's some things we can do, and which we are doing, around making ads more inclusive. There's some really simple language changes. There's some really good studies that show that if women particularly don't tick all the boxes, they probably won't apply. Us guys, if we get like 40% of them, we're going, yeah, we'll give it a shot. So don't do a bucket list of 25 different things people need to have when you don't really mean it or need it. Be much more open. Where we've got the things of the inclusive language, there's just some really simple things you can do to use inclusive language in your ads, your PDs, and your roles, which we're doing there as well. And we're trying to go a little further afield with some of the bringing people back into the workforce. There's some clear gaps there, particularly women trying to get back into the workforce after a breakaway when they've been caring for children, not so much just the 1 or 2 year maternity, but it might be a 6 or 7 year break. There's really smart people with a lot of skills. So we're trying to tap into that network of people and make it accessible for them and make it safe, because it's going to be kind of hard to start with. And also we've got to wrap some working processes around that to make it easy for people that do have to, and this can be men or women, that are having to juggle childcare. Let's make that simple. So they're what I'd say are the fairly easy things to do that just make access the pool that's there. But that pool's pretty weak. We particularly see it, women is getting better, but not in software engineering and data engineering, or it might be a bit, but it's coming off an appalling base. Maori Pacifica is almost non-existent in there still. So I think we as an industry need to do some things, and we are doing a few. One of them is I think we need to start looking that not necessarily everyone in the IT needs a degree, don't have to be university qualified. There's some really awesome people in quite senior roles that don't have a university qualification. I'm an electrician by background, that's where I came from. So there's a big pool of talent out there that we might not be trying to access and reach. So boot camps and training, software development training. I actually think we need to reach even further back though, like way, way back. There's a program out there that's run called Tahirua Toru Tech, which runs in primary schools, introducing technology in there. And I help with mentoring and coaching with some of those classes. What's really interesting, and it was really concerning, that even in this day and age, there was already a gender split happening with 8 and 9-year-olds that we're working with. There was a group of girls who were working on a little website, and the message I'd had from some of the boys were that girls won't be able to do that by themselves. So I thought, okay, that problem, if we've got the problem there, it's going to come through high school subjects, even before graduating at university. So I think we've got to be getting in there, getting into the right schools, not just the really flash ones that have got big IT labs, but some of the other ones where you have a higher Maori Pacifica population. Make sure they're seeing the role models, make sure they're seeing the opportunities, make sure they're getting into that training so they're entering the pool. So one of the examples, Tahirua Toru Tech, little shout out for them. I'd suggest reach out to them, have a look, offer your services. They can always use more. Try and get that diversity building right back up at primary school, and then we're going to see it come through in years to come where we need it.
Yeah, some solid practical things there for other senior execs to consider as well. So, Brian, when you reflect back on your own career, are there any mistakes that you've made that, when you look back, they've really shaped you as a leader, and, even though it probably wasn't enjoyable at the time, was a great lesson?
Yeah, really sucky question, this one. This is your worst possible question. I was going to say no, none at all. It's just been awesome. But that would be a big lie. So I think the biggie for me was early on, I wanted to do things fast. I still do. Patience is a bit of a challenge, as my colleagues will attest. They'll all be nodding if any of them watch this. So there's a tendency to want to just push ahead with things. I can see the answer. I just want to drive forward for it and get there and leave people behind. And so the way that would show up is I'd be having these fully formed ideas. This particularly showed up at Heineken. There was one particular project I did there very early on. Fully formed idea, kind of cooked it up all by myself, got it really perfect, and then went out to sell it to people and couldn't understand why people weren't getting it and weren't as excited. So I just tried to bash it through regardless. I can get there. I'll just make it happen, push through. And that did not work. It just didn't work at all. No one actively stopped me, but without active support from your colleagues and your peers and the wider network, things are just going nowhere. So it really brought it home to me. And I saw it really actively modeled right through Nike, was that sharing, collaboration, being a bit vulnerable, and listening, a lot of listening to understand what others are doing. So that was probably my biggie, is trying to push ahead on my own, thinking I knew best by myself, and then running straight into a brick wall.
Well, it's obviously, helped you as well on the way, because, clearly from the work you've been doing at Loyalty NZ, you've changed you've learned a lot along the way. So what advice would you give to anyone who was aspiring to be a senior IT leader?
So my biggest advice would be, don't get too hung up on your technical skills. Keep them there. You need a base of them, but they're not what's going to make you successful. If you want to be successful as an enterprise leader, which is what you want to be stepping up to as a senior IT leader, then learn finance. If you can't find your way around a P&L and a balance sheet and understand the difference between an asset, liability, depreciation, all those things, you are not going to succeed as a senior leader. It's again not about technology, it's about people. So hone your people leadership skills. That means getting out of your comfort zone and actually practicing some different approaches and coaching and learning and making mistakes and getting used to working through others. And not just leading through others, but also leading through leaders, because you're going to step up to a point where you're not even connected directly to the people that are working. You've got to start practicing that early. And you're going to be talking to people that don't understand anything about really what you're doing, because that's the nature of an exec. Your influencing skills are critical. You've really got to be able to articulate what you're trying to tell them and the way that they can understand and in a way that they can action. So those would be the key areas, I'd say. Start them early in your career. So you start building on them and build them as you go up, and be ready to let go of some of your technical expertise and trade it in for some of the enterprise expertise.
Great advice. So then finally, Brian, you've had a big couple of years at Loyalty NZ. What's important to you in the months ahead?
Well, we've got a lot of really cool technology things that we're doing. We've got a bunch of stuff on ML and automation and whatnot. But actually, that's not our biggest focus. It's the DEIB that we talked about. And in particular, boosting our diversity. That's a really big deal for us. We're technically pretty advanced now. We've got an awesome product. We've got a great data set. What we recognize is that if we want to make the most of that, we need diversity of thought in the organization, so that we're taking advantage of these opportunities. We can disrupt ourselves and do all that really cool stuff. Well, that comes from that diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, all of that good stuff, and getting a more diverse workforce. So interestingly, although we've got a full tech portfolio and program in front of us and got some really cool things for the year ahead, it's actually building that diversity and sense of belonging that we see as the biggest competitive advantage, particularly in the market, and we want to retain people. So that just helps with that as well.
Excellent stuff. Well, we look forward to hearing the results of all of the work that you're putting into those initiatives. Brian Ferris, Chief Data, Analytics and Technology Officer at Loyalty NZ. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Kathy.